The Brand Ed Podcast with Robbie Fowler, Episode 40, a behind-the-scenes look at a six-figure consulting personal brand with Mary Valloni. Boring, bland, blending in? This is not how you want to be perceived in a crowded market. Discover how to position, pitch, and profit from your brand right here on the Brand Ed Podcast. Today, we're joined by my good friend, Mary Valloni. She is a respected expert on fundraising and an award-winning author. She's built a wonderful, life-giving personal brand and consulting business. She has over 20 years of fundraising experience with organizations like the American Cancer Society, the ALS Association, and Special Olympics. Nowadays, she shares her expertise as a coach, trainer, and mentor to nonprofit leaders around the world. And she's going to give us a sneak peek behind the scenes of what it's been like to build her six-figure consulting business. Mary, thank you for coming on the Brand Ed Podcast. It is wonderful to have you, and I'm so thrilled that you're here. I can't wait to talk today, and I hope you're excited.
I'm thrilled. It's always a good day when Robbie Fowler and Mary Valloni are in the
That's
same.
right. It's guaranteed at least two of us will have a good time. It may just be us, but we will. Okay, so for our audience, I'd love for you to just introduce yourself a little bit. I've given them a little bio, but just tell us a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Yeah, I am a fundraising consultant. So I help charities and ministry leaders, pastors, you name it, with their fundraising efforts. So getting them from a place of, I have no idea how to raise money, to a place where, hey, we can actually raise money for a building campaign, a special project, whatever that is. That's really my area of expertise. And I've been doing that for as long as I can remember. It was like 20 years professionally, but I was the kid that was selling candy bars in elementary school, and I stinking rocked at it. So that's where this all began. So please, parents, do not stop your kids from selling candy bars in elementary school.
Let them sell candy.
Turn it into their career.
That's yeah. Right. Okay, so that's so funny because literally the next question I was going to ask you is, Mary, so when you were little Mary's running around third grade or whatever, like what did you think you would wanted to be when you grew up? If some adult asked you that crazy question, what do you want to be? Did you have any idea? What would you have said?
As a kid, I wanted to be a vet. Just because my best friend wanted to be a vet. So, it's kind of like, oh, I want to do what she's doing. Yeah. But that also falls into play, that I'm, on the Enneagram, if anybody follows that, I'm a 3. So I'm definitely a chameleon. So I like to hang out and do what other people like. But yeah, and I do love animals. We have 2 Dalmatians, of course. But once I got into, got a little bit older, I more or less just was like, you know what, I just want to spend time with people. I love people. And I don't know what career that looks like, but I love sales. And, I was always, kind of that top salesperson in whatever I did. And so I knew it was going to kind of be in that area.
Okay. So given the fact, because I know you and I could clearly see you, if you're working in some corporate sales position, you'd have a lot of enemies, and those would be your coworkers. They're like, can't believe she won top salesperson again this year, right? So I want to know, of all those different avenues you could have gone, like what got you into fundraising? How did you land there?
Sure. Well, in college, I did an internship with my college ministry. And that summer before that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go work for a church. And I spent the whole summer doing mission trips and just helping in the ministry space. And then the next year I interned, and I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to just take on their fundraising and see how this goes. And so I did their golf tournament and their annual, just all the different kind of fundraisers that they were doing. And I loved it. I was like, if I could work for a charity, whether that's, a ministry or more of a secular nonprofit, I knew that was where I wanted to be. So my degree was in organizational communications. So I kind of knew that nonprofits were my thing. And so, but I love helping people. And so that kind of fell into play for me in college.
Okay. So when you got started, you've worked for some big organizations we've all heard of, to name a few, American Cancer Society, being one of those. So why did you break out on your own and start your own consulting business around this whole fundraising idea?
Yeah. So in 2013, my dad was diagnosed with cancer for the second time, and it basically had gone everywhere. And so he ended up passing from cancer that summer of 2013. And I was working for the American Cancer Society at the time. And I just immediately kind of went into this whole like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to live forever. It's almost that kind of epiphany where, I started thinking about what I wanted to do. And I had always wanted to work for myself. I always wanted to work in consulting. And that was purely because I just wanted to help a lot of different organizations. And so that next year, I spent that year after he passed away, just really figuring out, how do I start my business? How do I get this thing off the ground? And within a year of his passing, I had started my new business, Mary Valloni.
Wow.
Yeah.
You crazy Enneagrams 3. 1 year later, it exists, right? It's in reality. So when it comes to fundraising, coming out of that story with your dad, that moment where you're like, okay, it kind of shakes you up. I need to figure out not just what I want to do, but why, right? Why I'm here, not just what I do while I'm here. So I've heard you share this before, but why do you do what you do around fundraising and nonprofits? I mean, that's not always the funnest group to work. There's not a lot of money. Can be a lot of complaining, right? A lot of woe is me. Okay, so why do you do what you do? What got you excited about doing this?
Yes. Well, and like during that year when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next, I asked this question all the time because I was like, why do I like fundraising? Like, I mean,
who likes fundraising?
I was trying to figure it out. I was asking my husband, I'm like, when I come home, when I'm at work, what gets me excited? Like, what do I get all riled up about? And he's like, when you get a big check. I was like, oh, okay. All right. And so, but what it all came back to was when you set a goal and it's really something that feels so unattainable, like it seems so impossible. And then you work through the process and you actually get to the place where you connect with people who want to be a part of what you're a part of, and you watch them get excited about the process. And then before you know it, you have brought together this collective group of people who all care about the same thing. They're all moving in the same direction, and they happily hand over their money. Yeah. I was like, okay, it's not the check. It's the fact that I was like, look at this journey that we have been on, that we no matter what the goal is. And so that's really what I love about helping other people with their fundraising, is that in the end, everybody wants the same thing, and whatever, it's that vision, it's that goal that you're trying to accomplish. So as I started to build up my business, I had friends who would say, you know what you do? And I was like, what? And they're like, you make the impossible possible. It's like, that's awesome. It's like, because, my big fundraiser that I put on for the American Cancer Society that resulted in all of this, took me on this whole, path, was that I had raised $500,000 in the Great Recession, back in 2007, 8, and 9, when things were so tough, and we net $500,000 on a first-year fundraiser for the American Cancer Society. And everybody in that community was like, what did you do? How the heck did you pull off $500,000 in a town that was no big? It was about 150,000 people in this town. Wow. It's like I was living in this, metro market that I live in now.
Not in Beverly Hills.
No, exactly. Like I was in Springfield, Missouri, for those of you who know the area, and we raised we net $500,000. And so it was really beautiful. But anyways, all that to be said is that I just really love taking something that is a dream, that somebody has this idea and they're like, I just have no idea how I'm going to get there. And I love walking people through it to accomplish that with other people.
Gotcha. Now, when you say, that $500,000 number, I know from working with you, we get to work together also, not just podcast together, that, one of the surprises is, especially like you mentioned, that's during the recession. And kind of beneath that question of how did you do that is there's no way there's that kind of money out there, right? the resources out there are so limited. We're all scrounging around for a few dollars. How in the world did you go up and gobble $500,000 when, particularly in a time when there's just not that much out there? So when it comes to that mindset of, well, I guess I'll settle. I'll settle for which happens a lot in this space. Tell me about, because I know it. Tell me about your conviction around that. Well, there's just not much out there, so I guess I'll just settle for this.
And that is a very common thing, especially in the area of fundraising, that there's this money pie of people who are giving to charity. And if you get a slice of it, it takes the slice from somebody else. And I have to remind people that the money that I give to charity could be the meal that I ate at McDonald's, or it could have been the vacation that I took, somewhere else. And I think people forget that discretionary funds can be used however people want to use it. So that money, all of our money, is up for grabs for whatever is going on. So I have to remind people that I'm like, there is endless amounts of money, and everybody has some. It doesn't matter how, you are homeless on the streets, you still have some. And so everybody has money. I tell people it's the least exciting thing about any of us. The money in our wallet. And so the most exciting thing is really our skills and our talents and what we bring. And so if you can invite people in, there's endless amounts of resources for your charity.
Okay. So I've seen literally nonprofits that are working with you. I've been on calls, like Zoom calls, especially nowadays, right? Where you can literally see their frowning, maybe hopeless, discouraged faces go from that to encouraged as you really just remind them that don't walk around with the scarcity mindset, that there's just not enough out there. So now we've got a group of people listening to this podcast. Maybe they're not, nonprofits looking to raise funds. If you are, don't worry. We're going to give you ways to connect with Mary at the end, right? You could, if that's you and you're just desperate, fast forward to the end, we'll tell you how to connect with Mary. But there's lots of folks listening to this that they're a consultant, or they want to start a consulting business or a coaching or a training business. Maybe they're a speaker. And a lot of times, you juggle two or three of those, like I'm a consultant, speaker, coach. So that, because I've heard you talk about, that's really drives why you do what you do, right? Is to help those folks that think there's just scarcity of resources out there. There's no way I'm going to raise money. So given that that's really Mary's thing, that's what drives what you do, how do you think that set you apart from a very crowded space? There's consultants all over the place, and there's fundraising coaches and experts all over the place. So how do you think that's helped set you apart from the rest of the crowd?
Yeah. Well, I have a tendency to have a conversation with somebody about whatever that dream is, whatever that thing they're trying to accomplish, and to be able to connect with them in a way to say, you're not crazy. And sometimes even verbalizing that dream or that thing that you want to do is sometimes scary. And so I try and just create an environment where you can be genuine and authentic, and you can say, you can be vulnerable about that thing that's been nagging on your shoulder, whether that's writing a book or starting your business or trying to raise money for that building. There's lots of things that people kind of tuck down, and they just keep shoving it down further and further because they think, oh, this is crazy talk. Who would ever even come alongside me to help me? So that's usually what happens is I connect very well with people when it comes to crazy, because I'm I think that there's just so many different ways to get to that, to that goal. And so I really just, I give them a safe place for them to dream. And then we figure out a way to get to where they want to go.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been fun watching, I wouldn't, my normal day job, I'm not a fundraiser. I get to work with you and help, but I'm, helping with some of the marketing and messaging and positioning and website stuff. I'm not, they're not looking to me as the primary fundraiser person. They look to you. And it's been so clear how they recognize, hey, Mary is the one that really taught me that there's not, I need to let go of that scarcity mindset and go for it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's super clear to me when I watch kind of from the outside looking in. How do you think that's helped you as a if you just put your Mary the consultant hat on, how has that helped you attract the right clients? That fact that what's unique about Mary is that, hey, she's going to knock that scarcity mindset right out of you with a smile. She'll do it with a smile, but she will knock it right out of you. How do you think that's helped you, get the right kind of folks connected to you?
Yeah, well, I have thought a little bit on I come from this more secular nonprofit space, and I have kind of thought a little bit that faith-based arena a little bit, just because I'm not a minister and I don't, I obviously love Jesus, and I've come up through that, as a believer, but I never thought I was like especially equipped to work with faith-based leaders, and you and I work with them quite frequently now. Yeah. But what I noticed is when I started doing my podcast and I wrote my book and I, started putting content out there, what happened was that because I'm a believer, I connected with other believers. And so people who were hungry for help tended to be that audience. And so for me, I'm like, what I've noticed is that I'm like, it really has attracted the ideal client for me, because it's that audience that's so hungry for change. They just don't know how to do it. And so I have, had to really embrace that and be like, it's okay that I don't have that minister background, that I'm not, I didn't go to, seminary or anything like that, but that I'm specifically equipped to help that faith-based leader raise money and to really go for whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish, starting the nonprofit or raising the money. So anyway, that was really a shock to me when I first started my business, because I thought for sure I would get like the Make-A-Wish foundations and the children's, networks and all those kind of more secular nonprofits. And I tended to attract in a really strong faith-based audience. And I have just, really embraced that. And as you and I know, we worked with that audience with missionaries and ministry leaders. Like, I love them. So they're hungry. Right. And I'm all about helping people who are hungry to learn. So,
okay. So you mentioned your book, and you in the book and lots of other places they can get it. We'll mention that at the end. You kind of created a framework, right? That this is Mary's framework. You can, again, we'll give more details on what book are you talking about and where can I get it. But just real quick, I want you to walk us through that framework. Just blaze through it real quick so people can get an idea. Oh, okay, that's maybe what a framework looks like if I'm a coach or a consultant or whatever. So walk us through that framework real quick.
Well, so when I was telling you the story about how I'd raised $500,000 for the American Cancer Society in a first year fundraiser, well, a lot of people started asking me questions about like, how did you do that? Right? You have success, so then everybody wants you to teach them how you did it. And I was like, I don't know. How did we do it? So what I did was I was actually going through Dave Ramsey's baby steps at the time. I was going through, Financial Peace University. And I'm like, okay, if getting out of debt is as simple as 7 steps, fundraising should be as simple as 7 steps.
Okay.
Like every decision that you're working on in this, and what's been so great for those of you who are not, fundraisers or, working for a nonprofit, this framework I'm going to tell you real quick is the same, like this works for everything. It works for every goal. So if you're trying to write a book, if you're trying to start a business, whatever, just listen to it from that frame of mind. So the 7 steps, they spell out the word freedom. So super easy, acronym for freedom. And so what I did was I just went through every step of the process. So very beginning, focus your vision. So that's all about knowing what you want, where you want to go. So you start with the end in mind, right? So focus your vision. Then we jump into run your research, which is the R, run your research. It's all about, hey, if you know what everybody else is doing and what's working and what's not, you have more confidence to take that next step forward. You know what direction you want to go in. Then you got the E, enlist your team. I'm a big believer in building out teams. I'm like, nobody should ever do anything alone. I'm like, that is the silliest thing, is to think that you should do anything by yourself, because we've never gotten anywhere we've gotten without the help of others. So enlist your team is number 3. And then the 4th one is enhance your brand, which is all about Robbie Fowler's special gift in the marketing sphere. And that's, building out your marketing collateral, like your website, your print materials, your colors, your, all that stuff that really tells people who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's enhance your brand, the fourth step. And then the fifth one is deploy your team. So once you've got all your branding, you've got all that stuff all ready to go, you can then send people out on your behalf. So now you're not just telling your story. Now all these other people are telling your story too, and you're all moving the same direction together. So that's deploy your team. Then we got the sixth step is organize your ask. That's where every fundraiser, every person who has a goal, they jump right to step 6. I should just go ask for money. I should just go ask for what I want. I should just go after that thing. And it's like, no, like do all those 5 steps that I just mentioned before. Then you can go ask people for what you want, and they'll really see you and say, okay, you're serious. You know what you're doing. You're actually going to do this. And then the last step is the D of freedom. And it's, the M of freedom. The M is make your difference. So that's all about celebrating and just thanking people and being able to really do what you came here to do. So that's really it in a nutshell. So freedom, and, it's worked for startup nonprofits, really experienced nonprofits. And like I said, I've had business leaders who said, hey, I went through this for my business. And somebody who said they had a doula business and they mentioned it. They're like, hey, I use this to help build my business. And I was like, that's stinking awesome. So, and the book is called Fundraising Freedom. So really easy to remember.
And we'll link to that in the show notes. So here, I want to pause for a second, because I have asked these questions on purpose, right? So the first set of questions around, okay, Mary, what got you into fundraising? Kind of what's your unique approach to it? That scarcity mindset that drives a lot of what you do. If you're a coach or consultant, speaker, trainer, anyone trying to figure out how you kind of position yourself, like that's why I asked Mary those questions. I did not tell her ahead of time, hey, talk about how you position yourself, right? But you can see she's got a very unique perspective that drives what she does and why she does it. That makes her very different from all kinds of other coaches, trainers, consultants, even in the fundraising space. It's really, really clear. And so go back and listen to that now that you know, like, oh, that's what you're doing. Yeah, go back and listen to how those questions help articulate what makes Mary's consulting business different than a million other consultants. Okay. The second thing is now we've moved to, okay, now Mary has a unique framework. She has a unique way that she goes about doing that fundraising and helping people overcome this scarcity mindset when it comes to fundraising. And I want people to catch what you just mentioned, and that is you went and did it. You didn't like sit in some classroom and develop freedom and then go try to execute it and go, oh, I got lucky. It happened to work. A lot of times it works that way, right? It's a retrofit. So after that experience, as people kept asking you how to do it, right? That's where you were like, okay, I've got to, like, just walk us through how you did that process. Did you take a day, take a week? Did you buy some course? What helped you get from I did it? How do I kind of deconstruct what I did?
Yeah. Well, I had so many people actually, like you said, they were asking me how to do this, and I knew that I had to write a book. And so then I'm like, okay, a book, how do you break down a book? And you think about, for me, 7 is my number. So to be honest with you, I just was like, I'm the youngest of 7, born in July 7, birthday 7/17. Like, so 7s are just my thing. So I'm like, 7, we're doing 7 steps. Right. That's what's going to happen. I grabbed the word freedom because I was like, this is a great word that just like correlates with what I'm trying to let people know that I'm like,
that's back to that positioning. Yeah.
Yes. I want people to act, think, and speak without holding back. That's what the definition of freedom is. And so I'm like, okay, that's what I want for people. So I actually took the word freedom, wrote it out on a sheet of paper, top down. I just started coming up with words that would correlate with what I was trying to accomplish in each one of those steps. And so I was on, how far did we drive? About 12 hours. We were going to a family reunion, and my husband was driving. And so I just sat in the passenger seat and just was like, really pulling apart my process. And I was like, okay, what did I do first? And what did I do next?
Okay.
And I kind of just went through the whole thing. And then it took me a good, probably 2 years from there of teaching it, refining the content, and then actually writing the book to where it came together for me. But I had talked to experts who were doing consulting work like myself. A lot of them had encouraged creating my own acronym, creating my own system. So I was like, I just took a lot of their advice and just started to really process that and say, well, what kind of teacher, what kind of coach do I want to be? And that's really how it all came together. So, but honestly, the steps and everything, it was fine-tuned by my coach. It was fine-tuned by others, but it really was just a sitting down with a sheet of paper. And the same thing happened when I was like, why do I like fundraising? Took out a journal and I just started jotting down all the reasons why, and I bulleted it out. So I'm a hands-on, give me a pen and a sheet of paper, and I'll just really processing day after day after day is really kind of how I work things through.
Okay. Excellent. So again, if you're a coach or consultant, you've got to have some way that you go do how you do what you do, not just what you do, right? And so maybe we'll link, who knows, maybe we'll link to a map of Mary's 12-hour journey, right? So like, what's Mary's trail to freedom frameworks? Okay, well, you start here, you drive all the way up here, and that's how you can.
You go from Missouri to Minnesota.
Yeah, there you go. Missouri to Minnesota. That's how you get a framework, right? But no, I do think it's really helpful for folks to hear, you were doing it for a while, right? And then as you experience success around something you enjoy doing, other people start asking you, right? That's natural for them. Well, how did you do that? That then it takes you another couple of years. It takes some intentional effort, right? For you to go, okay, that's a great question. How did I did it? But how would I tell somebody else or show somebody else that I did that? And then to go kind of refine that for a couple of years, like you said. Then comes the book process, which in itself, I imagine, is a whole nother refining, right?
Right.
Of that process. But I just don't want folks to, be under this pressure that, oh, I've got to know how to go do all this before I start my consulting business or coaching business. So where did Mary launch out on her own in that kind of whole process?
Yeah, such a great question, because, and I do want people to hear the same thing, is that this, nothing ever happens overnight. It just feels like, I journal a lot, so I can go back to my journals and I can start to see, like, when did I first kind of have an idea of doing something like this, and it's always so much further back than you think it was. So, but what I did was I knew I needed to go from one-to-one. So I knew I needed to go from the American Cancer Society to another nonprofit organization that would allow me the freedom, allow me the space to really start to process, how do I want to build out my business? So I was very fortunate. Chi Alpha Campus Ministries hired me right after I worked for the American Cancer Society. They have 320 university campuses all over the country, and I got to be their national advancement consultant.
Okay.
And so they were like, hey, teach us how to fundraise. And so I worked a fraction of the hours that I was working at the American Cancer Society. And then that freed me up. It really was the bridge to get me where I was wanting to go. And so, yeah, it was an incredible transition year for me. And I ended up working with Chi Alpha for about 5 years, actually, because I got a chance to really teach missionaries. And I was in the space that I wanted to move into. So it was a really great transition position for me. But I just want people, to hear that it's like, I took my same job. I literally did the math. I did the math on how much am I actually getting paid to do this job at the American Cancer Society. I pulled in all the insurance. I pulled in all the, taxes, everything. And I had a number that I needed to basically correlate to. And that's what I did, was I pitched that amount to a couple organizations. And that's how I made the transition. So, and then it freed me up to do one-on-one coaching, and it freed me up to do some other stuff as well. So, and to actually write the book. And so all that just was space for me to build out the rest of my business.
Okay. So if somebody asks you, so Mary, when did you start your business? Where do you say 2014, 13? Like, where do you kind of pinpoint that?
14 was the year that I started. So my dad passed in 13, and it was 1 year later in 2014 that I started my business.
Okay. Now we're 2021, somehow survived 2020.
All
right.
Yes.
Little
Later.
blip.
Yes.
How has your business changed since 2014?
Yeah, so it's changed drastically, and that's just because I have walked into a season where coaching and training. My goal was to really get into the hundreds and the thousands of individuals that I could help. So how I continued to build my business was I was like, okay, I went 1-to-1, like I just mentioned.
Okay.
So I went 1-to-1, then I was like, okay, how do I get to 10? And so then I added the coaching. So I grabbed 10, I started working one-on-one with 10 different nonprofits. And then I was like, okay, how do I get to 100? And so it was always about like scaling that and building out my business enough to modify that. So I'm now in the season of where I'm helping thousands. And that has really, just obviously changed the way that I do my business and helping a lot of people through coursework. I've got a program called Fully Funded Academy, and I work with our dear friend Mike Kim on that. So, but I will tell you guys, like real quickly, is that my book. So I mentioned I started my business, did the consulting work, wrote that book, Fundraising Freedom. And then that book, as I was presenting it at a conference, Mike Kim was in the audience and he looked at that book. And the next thing I knew, we were starting a business together, helping missionaries. And so it was just one door opened after the next. And I think sometimes we're always looking for, where's the 10th door?
Right.
I want to get through the 10th door. And it's like, just walk through the one door at a time. And, you're just always preparing for that next season. And that's really what I did was I just kind of layered on, started a podcast, and then I started helping more people and getting my message out to more people. So, it's really just taking one step at a time to build out that business.
Yeah. That's super helpful to take the pressure off to say, Mary didn't sit down in 2013 and map out, I'm going to do this for 2 years with my framework. Then I'll release a book and then somebody will come up to me and that will, skyrocket me into this new thing. Like, no, like you said, you're faithful to what you need to do. You're working hard. But as that next opportunity comes, you walk through there and it's much easier to look back now and go, oh, so you like tried your craft out, figured out how to do it. Then you mapped that out into a framework. Then you put that in a book that gave you a platform, which then helped, skyrocket this whole new kind of business. Yeah, but that's not what you were drawing out in 2011 is, this is exactly how it will work. So if you're listening again, that same process might work for you. It may be a great fit for you. It might not. So please don't hear anybody, let alone us, tell you, and the formula is, right? Come up with a framework, write a book, and then speak at some conference and some guru that you would just love to come speak to you will come speak to you and y'all partner in business and take over the world.
Exactly. When I was sitting down starting my business, I actually had, I did a little bit of a mind map and I just had a little stick figure of me in the middle and all the different areas of my life. And in my business, I was like, I want 3 clients. I wanted these 3 big clients. This is where it's always fun is that I had the one big client and then I brought on the second client. I was like, oh, dear Jesus, take this one away.
Oh,
like you realize really quickly that you have a capacity to a certain extent. And, even though you think, I can handle all this, you don't know till you jump in. Like, I mean, I don't know about you, Robbie, but I thought I could do back-to-back coaching calls. Like I could do one after the next. And you don't think about the fact that it's like you're mentally drained after being on a video screen for 60 minutes or 90 minutes or however long it is. And so you really do have to just step out, start working through it, figure out if that's what you like, and then go from there. But thank you for addressing that. Because if everything would have come true the way that I wanted it initially,
big trouble.
I'd be in the corner crying a lot. I'd be really exhausted and very, in a bad way.
That's so good. Well, that's it for part 1 of this episode. Coming in part 2, we're going to take a look at how Mary has evolved her own business, why she changed things after having her biggest year ever, and how these changes impacted her website and what she did about it. So make sure you join us for part 2 of that episode that will be coming out very soon. I want to give you a couple of ways to go ahead and start connecting with Mary. Now, as this podcast releases, she actually is hosting an online summit. It's called the Fully Funded Online Summit. That's from April 19th, which is today, through April 23rd. That's a free online conference. It's there to help missionaries and ministry leaders raise more support. I am privileged enough to be one of the featured speakers on there. So that summit, April 19th through 23rd, it's called the Fully Funded Online Summit. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. That's at fullyfundedsummit.com, fullyfundedsummit.com, or just click the link in the show notes. That's open all week, the week of April 19th through the 23rd. So you don't have to jump in. And I believe my other friend Mike, who's hosting it with Mary, that summit is open all week. So if you join, on Tuesday or Wednesday, in other words, not right at the beginning, you have the full week to take advantage of all the great help that you will find there at the Fully Funded Online Summit. So make sure you go check that out. I will also put a link to Mary's personal site, maryvalloni.com. There will be a link for that. And then I'll put a link to the Fully Funded Academy. So make sure you go check that out. And then again, make sure you join us for part 2 of the interview that will drop very soon. Speaking of things coming very soon, I recently shared some exciting news about the Brand Ed podcast. Recently, I've been exercising. This is my analogy of what announcement are you talking about? Well, there's this trend in I guess it's a trend in the exercise space. I've noticed it. It's called HIIT training, HIIT, high intensity interval training. It's meant to be like really short, really sweet. And that got me thinking, hey, I want to start doing that some with my podcast. So coming up on this same podcast feed, I just wanted to let you know there's going to be some new shows or new show types dropping in this feed. Each of these are going to be short, punchy, much shorter than these types of episodes. They're going to be thought-provoking. There's going to be one, it's going to be called the Brand Ed Bullet. It's going to give you 4 kind of quick wins, 4 weekend wins that will usually drop on a Friday. It'll be a super short episode, probably less than 10 minutes, probably even more around the 5-ish minute mark, or maybe even shorter. And that will give you something to check out, something personal, something to chew on over the weekend. So that's going to be called the Brand Ed Bullet. One should drop this week. Also, the Brand Ed Digest. That's where I'm going to do a really short recap and highlights from a previous episode. So that's a way for you to learn something really, really fast. And then if you want more, you can go take a deep dive in the full episode that I'll be referencing. But that's going to be called the Brand Ed Digest. I'm also going to be doing something called the Brand Ed Brainstorm. This is just a playground for crazy what if anything goes, why not ideas for you and I to consider for our business. Maybe some of us will try this out together. You'll let me know how it goes, or I'll try it out and let you know how it goes. But it's just a place where we can brainstorm together and say, why everyone zigs, what if we zagged here? And then the fourth one, I'm going to call that the Brand Ed Dissenting Opinion. It's kind of like when the Supreme Court, justice, one of those has a minority opinion on a judgment. It's kind of like an op-ed piece. It's a place where I may tackle a common teaching, thought, something around marketing out there that I go, I'm not sure if that's the whole picture, and I might slightly disagree. Not just for the sake of disagreeing, but just to get us thinking, is this the whole story or is there more to it? If you have a question on positioning, a question for the podcast, then I would invite you to share that. You can submit that question at robbyf.com/question. I will put that link in the show notes as well. I would love to hear from you, and I would be glad to do whatever I can to answer your question about positioning and pitching and profiting from your personal brand. Again, look for the Brand Ed Bullet, a new show dropping this Friday. It will be 4 freaky fast Friday wins, right, to get you going on your weekend. Something to check out, something to think about, something personal, and something a client has asked recently. So check that out. Until that drops, go and build a life-giving brand.